Hello, folks. We are live. We're returning to the Fireside chats in support of ZineQuest. I always screw that up. If you've been listening, I might have gotten it right this time. I'm sure I'll screw it up again before the show is over. I have Mark Finn, Gobsmack Zine, which funded just before we came live.
Will miracles never cease? Good to see you, Eric.
Beautiful.
Thanks for being here.
Good to see you. This is great. Again, as I've mentioned on throughout doing TotalCon and other ZineQuest, I go to conventions to socialize. I mean, I really go to get that face-to-face time and talk to people in the community. And 2020 was not a year for that. It was a year for being homebound to a large extent and not making those connections. So being able to do these live streams, talking with the people from the community has been a blessing and a great way to turn some of that around. But
I quite agree. It's been a lifesaver for me. Last year I had a terrible personal tragedy that consumed most of the year. And so I withdrew. And it wasn't until really at the end of this year that I started doing some Zoom chats and Skypes and things like that. And it's made a huge difference. Just being able to look somebody in the face, and and see them smile or whatever has been just so nice. It's not the hug I need, but it's a pretty good second place.
I know, and I'm used to getting my hugs at conventions. People you haven't seen since the last convention or the last year,
right?
At that same convention. Some people you only see at one convention, and it's a great connection.
Yeah.
And I miss it. I certainly do. And I mean, heck, I used to, quote, I'm retired, and I used to, before COVID, go down to my local neighborhood pub and see my same friends, most of them older than me, but that's okay. 3 or 4 times a week for lunch. Be down there for an hour and a half, 2 hours. Can't do that now in the world of COVID.
Yeah.
So you don't even have that ability to socialize. And with my niece and my sister, my brother-in-law, for the major holidays, it's like, okay, well, you guys get yourselves COVID tested and then isolate. In the hours in between, you're coming over, and then you can drop Shannon off for a couple of days,
right?
Because we're not going to see her for probably a couple of months. It's stressful. It really is.
Very much so. Mm-hmm.
So, hopefully, 2021 portends show a better year ahead of us.
Yeah, I've already been talking to a couple of folks who run the local shows here. And everybody remains hopeful.
Now, where is here?
I'm in North Texas, but
okay.
Yeah, so I'm actually really close to the Texas-Oklahoma border. So I'm about 3 hours from the Metroplex and also 3 hours from Oklahoma City. So I can do SoonerCon and some of those shows, and then pretty much all of the Dallas shows that will have me. And it's 6 hours to Austin, so that's Armadillo Con. And I was wanting to do Chupacabra Con this year, but I think that's going to be a little too close to call. So,
okay, yeah. Now, were you hit with the weather event in Texas?
Oh yes. Ordinarily, at being so close to the Panhandle, if you imagine Texas, right, the arm that comes out, and then the Panhandle. Vernon is where I am, is like right there. It's right in the crook before you get up into the Panhandle proper.
Oh, okay.
We get ice and snow pretty much every year. It's usually slushy stuff. It doesn't really stick. But this was drifts. This was I had 8 inches of snow outside my theater. It was crazy. And of course they cut the power. So
right.
I was fortunate enough to have in-laws in town that had heat and electricity. And so me and the dog spent a cozy 3 days over there with them, completely disrupted, but grateful to have it,
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of this small town, a lot of people were lucky in that it wasn't the entire town that was blacked out. So we all sort of clumped up, but all of my friends in Austin and Dallas were reporting the same problems. We get snow in San Antonio. I mean, to get snow in San Antonio, pretty much the White Walkers have to show up. I mean, it's
right.
We're in Game of Thrones territory when San Antonio has 6 inches of snow. They didn't know what to do. They were just like, what is this? I have no idea what this is. So, yeah, it was nuts. It was really nuts. And we're still, dealing with the fallout from that. So,
well, it's kind of like hell froze over. I mean, that really is the temperature change that you're looking at.
Yeah, it was pretty extreme, and it's one thing to have that weather happen when we've all got power. Like, all of us would have just gone, we'll be inside for a couple of days, no big deal. But when the power cuts out and the water cuts out and pipes burst and it's 0 degrees, it was a little much. It was a little much, but if 2020 taught us anything, it was that there's apparently no such thing as too much, because don't ask how much worse because it's going to get, because it'll get worse. Yeah.
It's like, so you thought the worst of the pandemic was over? It might be, however.
Yes, hold my beer. I've got something to show you. Yeah, it's white zombies. Well, there you go.
Well, it's like, all right, they've opened a rift and here they come.
That's right.
Lovely. So, Mark, and I usually ask this of most everybody I sit down with, because it kind of grounds the conversation and gets us a little history on you. But how did you get into gaming?
My gaming experience is probably a familiar story. I came in through Dungeons and Dragons, 4th edition blue box, and that was, and in fact, not only 4th edition blue box, but 4th edition blue box chits. I had chits to start things off. So yeah, I'm so excited to have dice when that happened. But I was 10 years old, I think. When I got a hold of that, and at the time I was already reading the stuff that was in Appendix N. I'd already gotten started on that. By the time I hit Robert E. Howard and Conan, I'd been playing D&D for a while. And so that was really the gateway. Now, I grew up in Abilene, Texas, which there's an Air Force base there, Dice Air Force Base. I found out later that the reason why we had to do disaster drills every year was because they were developing the stealth bomber there.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was fun. A nice little Cold War bonus, little extra something for you.
So you're just happen to be a target of the Soviet Union.
It would have been, we would have been one of the places hit. So anyways, what was cool about it was, because it was an Air Force base and there were 3 colleges there, there actually was there was a plethora of gaming material available, not just at like Walden Books and B. Dalton's, but there were 2 hobby shops in town that had installed. One of the guys was really grumpy about it because he was a train and plane place, and his magazine rack was where he put all of the Judges Guild and the AD&D modules, and of course it just crowded out Scale Modeler and all this other stuff. I don't think he ever recovered. I don't think he ever got over, that there were kids coming into the store buying stuff that didn't have anything to do with airplane glue. So, but that was also Dragon Tree Press was in Abilene when I was
really
there. Yeah. And so I knew Ben tangentially. He had a used bookstore there, and all of the Dragon Tree Press stuff, and the guy the curmudgeon that ran the hobby shop in the mall also carried Bard Games, Judges Guild, Thieves World, all that, or Thieves Guild, all that stuff.
Right.
And so my my education initially was this D&D stuff is really cool, but here's other stuff that you can play as well. And so it was a short hop over to Call of Cthulhu, Villains and Vigilantes. I real early on got okay with leaving the TSR farm. I didn't mind at all. I was happy to branch out. And so that really got me started. And I played pretty actively up until the probably early 90s when I decided that what I wanted to do was focus on a writing career. And I'd come back to it ever so often. I lived in Berkeley and worked at Chessex Manufacturing as their editor for a year. And that was an education. I went out there to write some games for them and also help with some of the lines that they bought. They recently acquired Lost Worlds from Al Leonardi, and they were relaunching Lost Worlds. And so I was just excited about that because I grew up playing those too. And they ended up not doing any of the things that they wanted to do. And so I left that and didn't really get back into it until, honestly, the hype around D&D 40th anniversary. There was a lot of nostalgia that came out, and it reminded, and about the time that I was reading that stuff and going, I had a ball playing that stuff. Why did I ever quit? Some people on my staff, I don't know, movie theater here, they were interested in playing Dungeons and Dragons, but like most teenagers, we don't know how to do it. Can you? And I said, well, I'll teach you how. It's easy. Right. And so that got me back into 5th edition. I'd had some of my AD&D books out, and I just, we don't have the hobby shops and the game stores and the comic shops here access to it. And so I just thought it would be easier to go with the edition that everybody could find a copy of. And whether
it's a bookstore, Amazon,
whatever your flavor is. 5th edition was going to be easy to find because it was going to be at Target. And so that was what sort of got me back into it. And at that time, I had also been approached by Modifius to contribute to their 2D20 Conan line.
Really?
Well, the other thing that I'm sort of known for is the biography Blood and Thunder, The Life and Art of Robert E. Howard. I've been active in Howard studies for 20 years and have written articles and the first full-length biography since Dark Valley Destiny. And so I am something of a Howard expert. And so when they announced the line, they said, we want to do it authentically. And so that's how I got involved in Jeff Shanks and Patrice Lounet and a couple of other folks. And so I did some stuff in the main book, but what I did a large chunk of Conan the Thief. And that was based on material that I developed back at Chessex. And so I decided to kind of pull that out and sort of fluff it again. And which is how we got to Monty Hall and ZineQuest last year. So bit circuitous, but we got there, I think.
But that is a more interesting and divergent history than I was expecting. I didn't expect the Modifius work. And I didn't expect I'd have a Robert E. Howard expert on. That's been that was a weird sort of side door to get back into gaming with in this respect, but not in a bad way, because everything that I did in my personal gaming stuff was really mired in the Appendix N list. When Lankmar when they published Lankmar for TSR. That was a watershed moment for me. My head exploded. And I still think that's one of the best things they ever did. And even though they incorporated just about everything from that setting and that book into
other games and other editions, it was lightning in a bottle. The way that city was built and the way the geomorphs worked and all of that stuff. And so I was already kind of, I had one foot in that anyways. So Conan was not hard to work on in that respect at all. Yeah, I'm really happy with what I did there, but all it did was make me want to do other things, and specifically my own stuff. I'm much more interested in writing original material than adapting existing material.
Well, I'm sure, and that is when it's your material, you're more invested in it because it's also a surprise to you too. Even if you know what you want to write, the act of writing it, and it's your material, it surprises you and entertains you as opposed to going back to somebody else's work and you're not really reimagining it, or maybe you're reinterpreting it.
Yeah.
Or when it comes to Conan, I remember the old, oh my God, the TSR version of Conan.
Yep.
Which wasn't much of a Conan game, in my humble opinion.
No. The system was more interesting, I think, than what they did with it. But there's a couple of flashes of genius in there. It's just sort of hidden.
And I have Nemodiaphus. I backed that Kickstarter, so I have the core book and all the other books in PDF. God knows I haven't read a tenth of the material for that game that I should. But when I do read it, I'm not reading it for the game material. I'm reading it for the setting, for the, dare I say it, fictional history of the world, because that to me is a bit more interesting. I still have the GURPS Conan, the solos. Yep. Those were interesting. Those were well done. They felt more authentic than the TSR version.
Yes.
Conan from Mongoose, I owned the core book and I just couldn't really get into it. And I don't know, but it looks like the current edition has authenticity built into it and respect to the IP.
Yes.
Which you don't always see.
What all of those previous Conan books have in common is that they're based off of the probable outline of Conan's career as rewritten by Schuler and Miller, and then added to when DeCamp was managing the line. And at one point in the quote-unquote saga, DeCamp, Carter, and Nyborg accounted for roughly 50% of the material that was out there with the Conan name on it. And
really?
So all of that stuff was incorporated into the maps, incorporated into the game settings. And so what we did was strip out everything that wasn't Robert E. Howard. And so in a lot of places we made assumptions based on what was in the text. And when we had to add material, because we did, the first thing that we did was we would look at, is there something else in Howard's work that gives us a model or a basis? And in lieu of that, we would then, me and Jeff and Patrice answered a lot of questions for people going, okay, is this canon? Would this work? Whatever. And so there was a lot of stuff that we checked and we're like, no, that's DeCamp. Don't do that, and so the material that's in there that's original, and because you have to have some of that for a game, was at least rooted in, whenever possible, first Howard's other works, Sword and Sorcery, pulps in general, and then only if all those sources were exhausted would we kind of go out into the weeds on our own. We even did naming conventions for unnamed cities. We would look at the way Howard named things and then work backwards from there. So it was a real, there was a studious aspect to it that I think And again, this is not a knock on anything that Zeb did or what Steve Jackson did or any of that. I'm not knocking any of that because they just didn't have access to this material. Or,
oh no,
but we had the chance to at least we wanted to avoid the mistakes of the past, and if we were going to make mistakes, we at least all wanted to make new mistakes
right?
that
Okay,
so.
fair enough. At least that way you can own your own mistake. But when you repeat somebody else's,
Right.
that's the worst. It's like, well, I didn't really vet this well enough, and we're perpetuating a mistake that's been done twice before.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's good. So you've worked on projects for obviously other IP holders within the gaming industry. So what got you to the thought of doing your own zine, let alone about Goblins? Because I'll be honest with you, I as a GM, I love Goblins. I've used them in many different roles.
Yeah.
I've inflicted them as my party captured one. Before they knew it, it was the party henchman. Kind of like comic relief, but at the same time, always, loyal because if they treated them well, they were loyal. To me, it's always what a goblin did, except most people treat them like shit, and therefore they'll respond in kind.
There you go.
So, and the fact that your zine is basically system neutral means it can fit into pretty much any fantasy campaign, which I like. Excuse me, a lot, because although my rule set of choice right now has been swords and wizardry, I like to dabble into Tiny D6, and I think that their rules for fantasy are spot on, and I like to sometimes go outside of my comfort zone, but with rules that are simple. And being system neutral means I don't have to worry about trying to convert or cram rules or mechanics into something that isn't going to fit into the system of my choice.
Yeah.
So how did this come about for you?
Well, it was easy. As soon as I opened 5th edition, I was just confronted with a bunch of stuff that I had not seen. I'd not really looked at D&D past 2nd edition. I was selling 3rd edition when I worked at ChessX, but so I saw the rules bloat happening. I was part of it. I sold that material to the game stores that then sold them to everybody else. But and I immediately recognized that 5th edition was basically D&D's greatest hits. Right? Here's the thing from this that we like. Here's the thing from this that we like. And I'm looking at Dragonborn and Tiefling and going, I don't know what to do with these. And B, I don't want other people to run something like this in a game where I'm trying to teach people using skeletons how to play the game. So I taped off everything that didn't look like my campaign from the early 90s. And then I went back to my notes and found just all this stuff that I'd put in, that I'd written, that I'd worked on. And at that point, it was just a simple matter of converting it over to 5th edition. And I found that it ported over very well. And it really felt more like my old games when I did that. And the groups that played with me thought that stuff was awesome, and so that was the inkling that made me think I could maybe sell this to other people. And because I knew there were a lot of guys my age getting back into it because their kids wanted to play D&D. And I thought, how cool would it be to have like some material that specifically feels like it was written, for Dragon Magazine circa 1986, but in 5th edition. And so that was the impetus behind, can I do this? And originally I thought I was going to take it to the DM's Guild. I thought that was going to be the avenue for it because of the no cost setup outside of layout. But I ended up not really caring for the way that it was structured. I frankly wanted a little more of the money if I was doing the work.
DM's Guild pretty much they take half, right? Or 45%, or 45 or 50, depending on whether you're exclusive or not exclusive to drive-thru.
And I didn't want to do that. Yeah, it's expensive, and for the granted, I had no illusions that this was going to be material that someone was going to look at and go, oh, we must put this in a hardcover. But I also didn't want to undervalue it, so I literally was this close to doing PDFs and putting them on drive-thru RPG and just flogging it when I saw ZineQuest happen. ZineQuest 1.
Oh, okay.
And I just saw the tail end of it and went, oh, that was really cool. So when ZineQuest 2 rolled around, I thought, you know what? This will be a good litmus test. Let's just try this and see how it goes. And it funded. So, I suddenly had to figure out how the stuff was going to look in a zine format. But again, that's a good problem to have. And so that was really all it was. I thought my campaign notes would be interesting, or at least an option. I've never been a fan of the Forgotten Realms. I've always felt that the realms were a little too basic, generic. And I get why they did them. They needed something that they could own that would be contested. At the same time, anybody that plays in Forgotten Realms has to work at it to make it their own thing. And maybe
but my problem with the Forgotten Realms is if you took the original gray box and you stopped with that and just maybe use some of the adventures like Evening Hall and stuff like that, but if you just settled for that, you were good.
Yeah.
All the expansions, the box sets, Waterdeep, the North. Once you got into all that, and then you had all the fiction added to it, now you had a situation where, as a GM, your players could be more knowledgeable of the setting than you, and they'll call you on it when you're inaccurate.
Right.
And I had that when I would run parts of it back in the day, and it wasn't even that expanded at that point. And then you have the issue where, a new edition, we're going to rewrite the realms. We're going to retcon certain events. And the other issue I had with it, again, from the DM's perspective, is that the Forgotten Realms was full of DM PCs. You were full of overwhelmingly powerful characters that, realistically, if they were part of the world, your adventurers would have nothing to do, because Elminster or others would take care of every bag of shit that landed on somebody's lap, and the world would be fine. So that was the issues that I had with it. Check. I mean, I always thought Elminster was best as a fictional concept in the ecology articles for Dragon Magazine. As soon as you move him into, or I loved the idea. And this sort of played into the Gothic stuff that resonated, certainly the Vancian magic and some of the things that Robert E. Howard wrote that Gygax really enjoyed. The idea that some of the spells were named after adventurers who had gone before. I like that idea because I like that sense of history. I don't want to meet Bigby. I'm not interested in meeting Bigby. It's more cool to go, I wonder why he had this hand thing. That's really nuts. What's that about? Every spell is a Bigsby's crushing hand. Yes. Yeah, it was a cool, it was a nice piece of flavor, Otto's Irresistible Dance, all that good stuff, Tensor's Floating Disc. I love that. And the Forgotten Realms sort of took that away and replaced it with stuff that wasn't as interesting to me. So I mean, about the time that was happening was when Lankmar came out, kind of in between that interstitial time. And so I just hopped everything over to Langmar, and we were running town adventures for years in Lankmar, and my city breathed and changed, and characters lived and died and came out, and I never ever had to play Foff and Grey Mouser
because I just didn't. It was
Right.
more interesting to have the players do it. And anytime someone would ask, it became kind of a running joke. Somebody wanted to meet Gray Mouse or to sell him something, and he was always out of town. I'm sorry, you just missed him. Sorry,
Yep.
he had to go to Ilfmar to
He's got more important things to do than deal with you.
And then they stopped asking because it did get more fun for them to just have their own stories.
Right.
That's why I would never run I'd never run a game where you got to meet Conan. Why would you do that? That's, ridiculous. Because as soon as Conan shows up, you're either the guy he's going to kill or the guy he's going to cheat. So yeah, it's, so, but that's, and I think D&D should be story driven. I think most gaming is in that respect. And
Right.
I think that the players should be the ones that get the cool moments. They get to do the neat stuff. Yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to do my own game. I wanted to do my own world again. And it was just so much easier once I started doing that, because then I could really redo everything from the ground up. I could scrub the pieces of the map that were originally Greyhawk and make my own map, and I could jettison other things and put this in. And as soon as I did that, everything sort of really came to life. So that's where Money Hawk came from, and Gobsmack is out of this as well. I have a larger project that I'm working on that I want to kickstart later this year, which is something that has been on my desk in some form or another for 20 plus years. And that's Polite Society. And it's all based on my rules for running heists in a fantasy setting. It's Ocean's 11 meets the Fellowship of the Rings. And because I don't think anyone's ever done a heist game with the GM in mind. I think Waterdeep Dragon Heist was a great book, except that there's no heist. There's maps and traps, and there's stuff in it that you got to go steal, but
Right.
there's not a sense of escalation, of repercussions. There's no system in place for how do the characters find out what the security is like at this place. How do you do that? And I think you have to, unless you're a heist and a caper junkie like me, as a game master, you may go, yeah, well, I really want to run a heist, but how do you do that and make it be an Ocean's 11 or a Dortmunder novel or a Richard Stark Parker book? How do you do that in a game? And so a lot of this stuff got floated in Monty Hall, and I'm reworking it and adding a lot more to it, some essays and things. And it'll literally be it's going to be for GMs. It's everything you need to run a heist, from how to set it up, what happens after, how to plot these things out. And no one's ever done that. I mean, there have been several thief games, but no one's ever really laid it out in this type of way. It's the kind of thing where you could sit down and not know how to run a heist. You run through this fill in the blank system, and there's your heist. And the procedures that you use are not different at all, really. It's just you structure the way player turns are a little differently, but it does not interfere with the flow of the game or anything. It's just a kind of a call and response. Anyways, we're in the weeds again. Sorry.
No. I told you before we started. This is going to be a hex roll. We go where we go. With we're going to still get to the same spot. But I do have a question about your current project and why goblins? Again, I love goblins, but why focus on goblins with this supplement?
I have always loved goblins. I've loved them more from a folklore angle than the D&D history angle. I went back to see if anybody had done anything different really with goblins in D&D, and they didn't. They just sort of, because goblins and orcs and bugbears all had to be different things. They created this sort of at the time it was cool. We didn't have a yardstick to measure it by, but I would go then read The Goblin Market by Rossetti and go, this isn't D&D goblins. And then it turns out that D&D goblins were actually the anomaly, not the other way around. And so I wanted to bring goblins into the gameplay alongside gnomes and halflings and elves and dwarves. I thought that would be more interesting. When Harry Potter did it, I was like, yes, thank you. Yes, of course you'd have goblins running the bank or, what have you. And so I loved, and then, that ends up being a major plot point, which was the other thing I thought was just great that she did. They have to go find out about, goblin magic and the way goblins view magic items. And it's very different from how a human would look at things. And while it wasn't what I had been playing with, it was still a yes, thank you sort of a moment, like a validation, and so I just thought that it would be more interesting to include them in the roster and have them be the care. They're still a conquered people, but they took the deal, 500 years ago and came in. So they're here, but they still sort of occupy the lowest rung on the social ladder, and nobody thinks much about them. But they're still goblins, and so when you run into them, you never really know what you're going to get, which is a great bit of uncertainty in city-based games, and especially if you're looking at the role playing and the social pillar of D&D or whatever. That's a great way to put something in the game that's a real challenge for a player that doesn't involve drawing a sword. They're more alien. Nobody has a preconceived notion of what your goblins are, like they do with your dwarves and your elves, thanks to the Jackson movies. And so anything that you can do to sort of help players have that experience of wonderment and surprise, I think is imperative. And so that was the thinking behind it. This was just a thing that I had done that I thought was really cool. It was one aspect, and it didn't really fit in Monty Hall because that was really more concentrating on sword and sorcery style stuff. And so I thought it would be just a fun little one-off to do. I didn't want to do 4 issues for ZineQuest 3. I wanted to do 1 because I was working on a larger project, and this seemed like a nice self-contained module.
No, I like the concept is awesome. Again, I have a weakness for goblins, so
yeah,
it fits that moment for me.
I think a lot of goblins are, for GMs, I think goblins are favorites. I mean, they're such a fun monster to throw at people, and people like to play them for laughs, or at least make the encounters sort of humorous. And why give that up when they get to second level, man?
Oh, no, you're right, and
yeah.
And I've always, as a GM, seen goblins as they're a weak race, but they'll bluff. They'll pretend that they've got more going for them, but they're smart enough. They survive this long. They'll negotiate. They're not kobolds to me, because again with AD&D, you always had D4 kobolds, D6 +1 goblins, 1 hit dice orcs. You had 2 hit dice gnolls.
Right.
3 +1 bugbears. You had ogres at 4 +1. So you had this progression that was built into the game.
Yeah.
But you had to figure out how do they differ. And for me, the idea for goblins, like kobolds were always like whatever. They're legit creatures. They think differently. But for goblins to survive amongst these more powerful races of evil creatures, I always figured they had to be cunning and understand their position, and at the same time be willing to pretend that they're more powerful when they can bluff a situation. So they're more likely to negotiate than the others. They'll take the payout and leave you, and they'll generally. And I always play them if they make a deal, and they realize they're making a deal with another group that is at least powerful, maybe more powerful than them, they keep that deal because that's safety for them.
Right.
If you're weaker, then they probably won't even make a deal, or they'll impose one. But
yeah, and all that kind of stuff is sort of baked into the system that I've got, which is nice. You could run what's in here, and it wouldn't interfere with anything that you currently have going on. Like all that stuff sort of tracks, which is
right.
Which was the whole point. And then and nothing is statted out. So this is literally just to give you sort of an instant personality. Here's if you need a goblin that's selling plate mail in the dungeon, here's your guy. And then if you want to do something bigger or better or more with it, you can add stuff in. But this gets you there with a minimum of fuss. And one of the things the first thing that I did was I figured out naming tables, because I love weird goblin names, but it just takes so long to come up with them. So I literally spent a week like figuring out all the different iterations of the goblin component names. And so now that's on 4 D20 tables. And so,
okay, that's fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So the first 2 rolls get you the first name. And then the second 2 rolls get you the last name, and it comes together like very quickly. And you get names like Flurg and Glorn and, just sort of odd names,
Well, I'm an improv style DM for the most part. Personally, if I'm running my own material, I'll have it outlined, know where I want it to go, but I like to work off my players. Yeah. So a lot of times when it comes, it's like, oh, I didn't expect them to capture a goblin. Okay, now I got to make a name for the goblin, and I need a personality for them really quick. How am I going to do this? Because, and you realize in those first few moments, how you play out the goblin is going to decide whether they find a goblin to be expendable or useful.
Right. Right. And so it's frustrating because it really is sort of that first impression. And for characters where that you want to have a goblin be like the crime boss, right, or whatever, that's you can build that in as you go. But I wanted something that if you were running on it on the fly, if you were doing a run and gun and you needed a goblin, this goblin would at least be interesting enough that you could play it with a personality quirk and a thing that differentiates him from other characters that you've been running. And then, if they think that's cool and like him or keep him around, you can then build off of that. But if not, you can just tear up the index card and ditch it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So I'm already a backer. Again, I love the concept.
Thanks very much.
No need to thank me, man. The pitch sold when I saw the Kickstarter. I was like, this is written for me to use because again, like I said, I have an affinity for goblins that I don't have for the other lower basic canonical evil races of D&D.
Right.
I've always seen them as the survivors, and if they're a survivor, then why are they? And their ability to adapt is certainly part of it. So I'm excited to see what the final product is going to be, and I'm excited to see your later projects because you seem to have a few irons in the fire.
Man, I am so ready for Polite Society to be done and be a thing. Those heist rules have gone through 4 different iterations, and at one point I'd written my own system, and then at another point we're going to do it as a sort of a diceless game with playing cards and poker chips, because that sort of felt that had a casino vibe to it, which was cool. Right. And then when I sort of hit upon the idea of doing a fantasy heist, I thought that was just something different enough in the marketplace that no one had done. And every time I see somebody do a heist thing, I go, oh, is this going to be the one? And then I go look and I read it and I go, no, that wasn't it. It got close. John, last name forgets me, the guy that was the showrunner for Leverage, that game that they put out where he wrote his essays and material, at least he gets into the theory and sort of the construction, which is closer than I think a lot of than any other project ever got. But again, that execution, try to have your players do this. And when you make this up, do, blah, blah, blah. But there's not really a cut and dried. I want to set this up this way. And I've often found that one of the easiest ways to get to figure out a system is to roll up a character. Right. or turn to the tables where you're building a random magic item or a random dungeon or whatever, and try it and see where the stuff fits in, and I think that's how you're able to conceptualize what works for you as a GM. And so and again, that's just not something I've ever seen done with the heist. So this, I think it's going to be really cool. I've already gotten a lot of really positive feedback from it. People have really taken to it and gone, oh, now I can run a heist. It's like, yeah, cool. So yeah,
that feedback you want, man. That's
it really is. Yeah, I've been really fortunate that everybody that's reviewed Monty Hall has got it. They like, oh, this is what he's doing. So yeah, Polite Society will have that in it. I commissioned some artwork for it, and one of the Leandro, who worked on some Pathfinder comics, has done some art pieces. And what just to sort of sell the concept, I took like some very classic heist scenes and reimagined them with elves and half orcs and all that kind of stuff in it. And so my favorite thing that he did was the poster from The Usual Suspects, where they're all in the lineup, and it's a dwarf and an elf. And
nice.
I love it. And so I think when you see the artwork with it, you'll be like, oh, yes, this is what we're doing. Yeah. So it's going to be a fun thing. It won't be system neutral completely, but the front part of the book, that's all heists,
right?
That, and if it, depending on how it teases out, I may make a separate book that's a GM book and a player book, because they really should be kind of, two different things. So we'll see. I got options, and I got time to figure it all out.
Oh, well, I'm looking forward to it. Sounds good.
I'll keep you in the loop.
Gobsmack is still funding for how long is the funding period going for?
One more week. I set it so that it would end on the last day of February, and then just kind of counted back from there.
Okay.
I did not plan on the Night Watch needing to battle the White Walkers when I launched.
You really couldn't plan on that one now, could you?
No, that's some dumb luck right there.
Well, I'm glad that power started returning to Texas.
Me too.
I know with Bad Mike, I was nervous for our 4 nights of live streams, but whereas his house didn't have internet, the warehouse that they have from North Texas, a block and a half away, had internet because it was close to a police station. So go figure, it all worked out in the end, at least in that case.
Awesome.
Mark, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon.
I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Oh, no, I love doing this stuff. I really enjoy it. I think that you really, it's one thing to read a summary or a pitch on a Kickstarter page. It's another to hear the passion of the author that put together a project and explain stuff and talk about stuff as to how it got there that you're not going to see on the Kickstarter page. You're not going to be able to read it. You're not going to see it in sometimes that 2-minute video summary that people put up. You don't catch the nitty gritty
Right.
a lot of times behind it. So I really appreciate you taking the time out. Folks, Gobsmack Zine, go Kickstarter, look it up. Aside from that, be safe, be well. If you're in Texas, be warm. God bless. Roll those dice well. And I'll be back I'll be back probably tonight doing a Gamer's Health with my wife Rach, and Monday night myself and Bad Mike are going to be guesting on God Damn It, Zach. So that should be a lot of fun. We'll probably be recounting the time that Skeeter may have possibly normal, almost kind of violated Bad Mike at GaryCon. I'm just saying it might come up because I was a witness. And Zach recorded whatever incident happened. Zach happened to record. That's all I'm saying about that.
There you go.
There you go. All right, folks. Thank you much. Catch you later.